In the summer of 1859, a Swiss businessman was passing through a town when he encountered something he couldn't ignore. 80 years later, a British stockbroker sat in a Prague hotel, watching families searching for safety. And in the summer of 1940, a Japanese diplomat sat at his desk in Lithuania, facing an impossible choice. 3 different people. 3 different moments in history. None of them set out to become heroes. They simply made one quiet decision when looking away would have been easier. What they did next changed lives far beyond their own lifetimes. They simply made one quiet decision when looking away would have been easier. This video is about that decision. Not grand gestures or famous names shouting from podiums, but quiet, personal choices made by ordinary people when the systems around them were failing. We're going to explore 3 true stories from 3 different centuries. Each one stands on its own, but together they reveal something profound about how change actually happens in this world. By the end, you'll see why these 3 moments are connected by more than just kindness. They're connected by something much rarer and much more powerful. In the winter of 1938, a 29-year-old British stockbroker named Nicholas Winton took a ski trip to Czechoslovakia. What he found instead of holiday cheer was fear. Nazi Germany had just taken over parts of the country. Jewish families and political refugees were trapped, with almost no way out. Parents were desperate to get their children to safety. Winton wasn't a politician. He wasn't a relief worker. He was just a man on vacation who couldn't look away. He canceled his ski trip, set up a makeshift office in his hotel, and began doing what governments were not doing. He found British families willing to take in refugee children. He raised money. He fought through mountains of paperwork and bureaucracy. Between March and August of 1939, 8 trains carrying 669 children left Prague for Britain. Most of those children never saw their parents again. Many of their families would later perish in the Holocaust. Winton kept a detailed scrapbook of every child he helped. Then he went back to his ordinary life in England and said almost nothing about what he had done. For nearly 50 years, almost no one knew. It wasn't until 1988, when his wife found the scrapbook and a television program surprised him with dozens of the now-grown children he had saved, that the world learned his name. By then, those 669 children had become parents and grandparents themselves. Today, thousands of people are alive because one man on a ski trip decided that someone had to do something. One year later, in the summer of 1940, another man sat at a desk facing a similar flood of desperate people. Chiune Sugihara was the Japanese vice consul in Kaunas, Lithuania. As Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union closed in, thousands of Jewish refugees, mostly from Poland, gathered outside his consulate, begging for any way to escape. Sugihara knew that issuing transit visas through Japan was against his government's strict orders. He cabled Tokyo multiple times asking for permission. The answer was always no. For weeks he wrestled with the decision. Then one morning he made his choice. He began writing visas by hand, day after day, night after night. When his government ordered him to stop and leave the country, he continued writing even as his train was pulling out of the station, handing visas out the window to people running alongside the tracks. Estimates suggest Sugihara issued between 2,000 and 3,500 visas directly. Because many were for entire families, historians believe he helped save around 6,000 people from almost certain death. The true number of lives touched is even larger. Researchers estimate that between 40,000 and 100,000 people alive today are descendants of those he helped. After the war, Sugihara was dismissed from the Japanese diplomatic service. He lived quietly and modestly for the rest of his life. He rarely spoke of what he had done. Like Winton, his story remained mostly unknown for decades. We have to go back further, to June 24th, 1859, to understand where this pattern truly begins. A Swiss businessman named Henry Dunant was traveling through northern Italy on a business trip when he arrived in the small town of Castiglione del Stiviere. On the same day, one of the bloodiest battles of the 19th century was fought nearby. Over 40,000 soldiers lay dead or wounded on the field. The military medical services were completely overwhelmed. Thousands of men were left suffering with almost no care. Dunant was horrified, but instead of continuing on his way, he stayed. For 3 days and nights, he organized the local townspeople, especially the women, to help the wounded. He treated soldiers from both sides of the conflict equally, repeating one simple phrase, "Tutti fratelli." We are all brothers. When he finally returned home to Geneva, he couldn't forget what he had seen. In 1862, he published a book called A Memory of Solferino. In it, he proposed something radical for the time, that every country should create permanent volunteer aid societies to care for the wounded in war, and that these societies should be protected by international agreement. His book spread across Europe. In 1863, a small committee, including Dunant, founded what would become the International Committee of the Red Cross. 1 year later, the first Geneva Convention was signed. Today, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement operates in nearly every country on Earth. It has helped hundreds of millions of people in wars, disasters, and crises for over 160 years. All of it began because one man saw suffering and refused to look away. When you place these three stories next to each other, a clear pattern emerges. None of these people had official power. None of them had been trained for what they did. None of them knew their actions would create ripples across generations. Winton saved 669 children. Sugihara helped save around 6,000 people directly. Dunant's decision led to an organization that has helped hundreds of millions. But the real connection runs deeper than the numbers. Each of them faced a moment where the systems around them, governments, armies, bureaucracies, were either unable or unwilling to act. And in that moment, each one made a quiet, personal decision. I will not look away. I will do what I can with what I have. That single choice, made without certainty of success, without fame, and often without thanks, became the seed of something much larger than themselves. Winton's children grew up and had families. Sugihara's visas created entire family trees that would never have existed. Dunant's idea became a permanent part of how humanity responds to suffering. This is how real change often happens. Not through perfect plans or powerful institutions alone, but through ordinary people who decide, in their own small corner of the world, that someone has to do something, and that someone might as well be them. History is full of darkness, but it is also full of these quiet lights. Winton, Sugihara, and Dunant remind us that we don't need to be famous, or powerful, or perfect to change the course of someone's life, or even the course of history. We only need to decide not to look away. If this story moved you, I'd love to know which of these 3 moments stayed with you the most. Leave a comment below. And if you want to see more stories like these, true moments where ordinary people chose to be the light, consider subscribing. We're building an archive of the quiet good in human history. Thank you for watching. And remember, the next quiet decision might be yours.